impact and visibility are two different things. If you don't occasionally step forward and help others see the value of the work that you're doing, opportunities will pass you by. So make that conscious effort to, even though you're just crushing it and doing all kinds of great stuff, if nobody knows you're doing it, it's in a vacuum. I hate to say it, but it really doesn't matter. Um,
Right. Welcome to the She's So Sweet podcast, where we interview accomplished women who have worked their way to the C-suite. I'm your host, Kristi Falteruso, advisor, investor, former CCO, and award-winning customer success executive. I'm so excited today. We've got our guest, Alison Bukowski, who's the Chief Customer Officer at Point of Reference. Alison, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks so much for having me, Christy. This is exciting. As you said, yes, CCO at Point of Reference, where my focus, of course, is on helping organizations turn customer relationships into business outcomes. That's really what I've been focused on for the last decade or so, growing up in marketing and then customer marketing and customer advocacy, because I just really felt like CX was not getting its place at the table. So I decided, since it's not, I need to make it happen, put my money where my mouth is. I always talk about on social that this whole people before professionals. So certainly that's one half of it. The other half of my world is spent being a mom to two teenage girls, one of whom is leaving the nest this year, and
Hmm.
sharing my space with my husband and far too many furry creatures. But so I live in organized chaos. That is pretty much the name of the game here.
I think that's pretty standard. I think most of my guests that I have on here, it's like, it's not enough to be an executive. You have to be an executive with a billion other things kind of creating a mess behind the scenes. And so we'll get into how we actually navigate that.
We're all
Um,
overachievers, and this is what happens.
exactly, exactly. Well, I do love that we've been sharing the same journey with our daughters getting ready to leave and go off to school this year.
Yes.
I know that I don't think it's been easy for either of us, and lots of coaching and conversations and maybe even some tears, but I'm excited for both of them, and I know they're going to go off and do tremendous things, and hopefully they have the journey that they aspire to have.
That's the goal, right? We set them up for success and then watch them hopefully fly so they don't come back
Right.
to the nest.
Right. Although I envision my daughter coming back to the nest to do laundry. So that's
Oh, food, laundry, money, those things, absolutely.
all of the things that we haven't quite prepared them for fully yet, at least my kid.
It'll be a wake-up call. It'll be a
It will
wake-up
be.
call.
It will be for sure. All right. Well, that said, we're actually going to go back to a time, maybe even before our daughter's age. So, you know what I love to start with is I want to hear kind of how your career aspirations started. So, when you think back as early as you can to as young as you can,
Mhm.
what did you actually think you were going to be when you grew up?
I can go way back. I don't know what it is about, some girls thinking about what their wedding will be like, etcetera. I never had that, but I always thought about what I wanted to be. So probably kindergarten. And I was gonna be an author. That was all I wanted to
Oh,
be, specifically an
interesting.
author of children's books, and I thought very highly, apparently, at the time of my artistic skills because I was going to illustrate them. I figured out fairly quickly, maybe later elementary school, that I could write, but I don't have an ounce of artistic, talent, so that dream had to evolve and change, and then I think throughout high school I was gonna be a high profile magazine editor. That was it.
Oh,
That was going to be the
interesting.
thing.
What was it that drove you to think that you would be a children's book author?
I think well, I'm an only child, and which I think plays into this, and also the daughter of a library director and an attorney. So there's a little bit of the right and the left brain, I think, that come together, but also being an only child, not no siblings or things like that. So when you're like a young kid, you make up your own worlds and you have to rely on your imagination. And I always remember writing stories, and I think it really has to do with my dad and the encouragement. To this day, he's waiting for my book to come out because he thinks, as he probably should, as a dad, that always encouraged it. Keep writing. I love reading what you wrote, and that really has stuck with me. And writing has never left me, regardless of what role I have been in. As a CCO, I am still the person that people will say, "Can you read this email for me? Could you make sure that this makes sense?" Because I will nitpick every instance of passive voice, every comma that's not in the right place. It's just it is in my DNA.
Man, my content must be really painful for you to read because my spelling, my grammar, my misuse of commas, probably an overuse is probably very evident.
Well, they no, your writing is pretty solid, and I'm not just saying that because 'cause I'm on your
Woo!
show, but there is an important question I like to differentiate my friend group isn't, are you pro Oxford comma or not?
So it's interesting because I think people have evolved their writing because of the suspicions of AI, right? So if AI is using like the M dash, right, is another one. I loved a
Oh,
dash. I loved a dash. But now it's like I can't use a dash because if I put a dash anywhere, it's like, oh, AI wrote that. And I'm like, no, look at the other typos in my post. I guarantee you I
and the
wrote the whole
ellipse,
thing.
like, yeah, I'm a dash, I'm a semicolon, like, fanatic,
Yeah.
so once the M dash became the AI giveaway, it's like, well, now I have to redo
Right.
my
Everything.
writing.
It's been really tough. Not that that's what this episode is about, but I have had to evolve a lot and change a lot about my writing style so that I almost feel like I'm using AI to identify if my content sounds like AI so that I can make it sound more authentically like me, even though I'm the original writer of everything. It's so crazy. It's like, because I don't want there to be doubt that my content is authentic.
No, I absolutely not, and I think that's really interesting, the psychology now that goes behind this, because you asked about the evolution of my, what did I want to be and aspire to? It was in high school and college when I became more drawn to, I think it's because I took a psych class and a sociology class, and people, and the things that are just very human-centric and
Mhm.
understanding what makes people tick. So I actually went in as a child psych major. I came out as an English major.
Well,
So obviously that shifted, but it was during that time when my that human focus, and not surprising, my first job out of school was actually doing proposals for a center within the University of Minnesota that focused on programs for students with disabilities.
oh,
So I've always found
wow.
ways to combine people with the more systematic or technical skills that I have in my tool bag.
Well, I mean, this all makes sense. You're connecting a lot of dots for me here. So let's continue that because we're still far from where you are today. So then, how did you go
This is
from
true.
doing that to now what you're doing at Point of Reference?
Part of it, I think, like a lot of people, was just riding the waves and a little bit of luck, but writing was at the core. I started in a writing role, which evolved into, so I was in academia. I'm one of those people that has done the three-peat. Then I moved into nonprofit, where you wear 57 hats, and working in business development and proposal writing and overseeing actually a humane society. That's another passion of mine. So it was a dream for somebody at, 24 or 25 years old to be doing that. But nonprofit is amazing and the people that are involved are incredible. It was simply not fast paced enough for me, which
Yeah.
brought me to corporate America, and I got tossed into marketing. And that is where, if I fast track it, and you can certainly ask for more detail, but marketing, from content marketing into CS type roles, operations roles, I've always been in one of those functions. So what I would see within companies is a lot of talk about customers, and I know this is near and
Yep.
dear to your heart, Christy, but we don't really do a very good job of building systems or decisions around them. And that is how the last decade pretty much has gone within customer advocacy, customer experience, and now landing in the CCO role.
So let me just ask because obviously I'm familiar with the scope of the work that you would do as a CCO. But customer advocacy doesn't always sit under a customer success leader, right? I've seen it sit in product, I've seen it sit in marketing. It really, I would say it depends for sure. But it also didn't get a lot of love in a lot of organizations, right? It hasn't always been prioritized, even though so many of us can articulate the why it exists and the ROI behind making the investment. But now, how did you go from that to like this broader scope role while also still trying to like feed that small engine, right? Because it's not the bigger part of the work that you're doing any longer, right?
Right, it's not, I mean, there's elements of it, and that's the thing about customer advocacy, is I am on a mission, and that's part of why I landed in the role that I'm in now. I am on a mission to take customer advocacy out of, like, a singular contributor, a role, and actually make it an organization-wide, part of the culture, I
Yeah.
guess, and I know people say that, there's a lot of, buzzwords, but people still to this day do not understand the power behind their customers. They simply are not leveraging them and partnering with them. I will not use the word use because I hate that. You're not using your customers for anything. You're partnering with them to, demonstrate results on both sides of the coin. So it wasn't really a single moment. It was more of a series of realizations over time, and the biggest one is that as I continued to sort of push that boulder up the hill, as many customer advocacy professionals do, it's it's gratifying work, I think, for us in what we do with customers. It is a slog when it comes to inside the walls of our organization because there's this disconnect between what companies say and what they actually do. They talk a lot about customers and how important they are. It's on the website, it's splashed in the mission statement, it shows up, in keynote speeches. But when you actually look at the ELT, um, they're nowhere near connected enough, and the customer simply isn't represented, and that just really started to bother me to the point where I decided a couple of years ago that it's not okay, and again, if you want to be the change, right? So here I am trying to be the change, and I'll keep hopefully get that boulder up the hill.
I was gonna say we could probably convert this entire episode to being a blur between She's So Sweet and After the Close because we could very easily pivot. But I want to go back to your career. So let's take a moment because I want to reflect back on your journey. And I want to hear some of the most pivotal moments or like the big decisions that you had to make that you feel like really contributed to your ascent to the C suite.
Yeah. I think as I said, one of the biggest shifts in for me in my career was making the decision that if I wanted to keep advocating for customers, and I knew that I did, I needed to do it from a position where the conversation could actually influence strategy, not just
Mm,
execution,
yep.
right? So I started leaning much more intentionally into the business impact of customer advocacy. Now, of course, it's everywhere, but several years ago, we were still squishy in that space,
It's
right?
fair.
As far as a lot of feel good stuff, and we don't need to get into it because it's everywhere now about proving value and metrics and ROI. But I was at the forefront of it, and I knew that if we were ever going to make an impact, we had to start speaking the right language. So that was the first goal. How do I make this appealing? How do I show, the revenue, the risk reduction, which I
Hmm.
think is something that a lot of people don't do a great job of showing, and how it strengthens like go to market strategy and product positioning. So that intentionality, I guess, was a big deal. And it sounds simple, but I think it gets lost along the way because we don't take that moment to say, nope, how do I frame the customer voice in the terms of, outcomes? Then you can start making an impact on how that role, and like I said, I don't want it to be just a role, but that function, that discipline, people start paying more attention.
Yeah, that's fair. So when you think back to that, right? Like obviously you had to make some big decisions along the way and even just your career pivots, right? Like if you think or even go back earlier, right? Working in higher ed and then kind of going to nonprofit and all of those moves I'm sure had some intentionality behind it, whether it was like just your desire to do different work, having a more fast-paced environment, getting into marketing, right? Which of those do you feel like really set you on the trajectory to get to you to where you are now?
It's an interesting question because everything has been a stepping stone, and I mean that, and again, back to that word intentionality, right? Because you have to cut your teeth before you can move on to
Yep.
the next place in your career. So, at the time, it made no sense. But now when I look back, and hindsight's always 2020, of course, but there were moments in each of those. In academia, it was these aren't my people. It's slower pace, So I knew it wasn't a personality fit, for
Yep.
example. So I had to look elsewhere. I very intentionally went into nonprofit because as a 20 something, it was going to let me wear 10 different hats, which is very exciting when
Yeah.
you're hungry and you want to learn. So that was my big learning opportunity. And then being quite honest, the money wasn't there. So
Then
it was a
there's
move
there's
to
not really a path to get rich in nonprofit.
no, there really isn't, and I have stayed with it. I've volunteering, and when I retire, I've got all kinds of things that I wanna do and go back to that world, but in order to do that, I have to also set myself up for success. So
Yeah.
that was the shift into, corporate world, and I've been in tech or healthcare my entire career. I think healthcare, when I was with United Health, that was really a big moment for me in how I could think about business
Mhm.
in a really different way. Because in healthcare, we talk a lot about systems, right? And we talk about evidence-based medicine. And I mean, I was in advocacy and training roles and things like that. So it's not like I was one of our, clinical experts, but we're still rowing in the same direction.
Yep.
And I thought that was fascinating and how I wanted to execute on customer advocacy was doing something like that and how in my professional space I needed to be disciplined and have the systems and the framework in place because just having great ideas means absolutely nothing if you don't know how to execute them and you don't know how to position them in the right way. So that was a big moment for me when that realization came that the work is bigger than just
Yeah.
rolling up your sleeves and doing the work.
No, I mean, I love that, and I think it's great perspective, and kind of leads me into my next question here. So, obviously, you made a lot of different moves that set you up for your longer term success, but I know that it's never easy getting there. So, what were some of the real like battle scars? What were those big, significant challenges or obstacles that you faced, and how'd you overcome them?
Well, first of all, I'm not really good at playing politics, and it's just not never been of interest to me.
Yeah.
So I did sit back for a while and I watched, but
Mm,
I'm here to say you got to get at least decent at it. I'm just being transparent because there's a
yeah.
lot of politics in promotion. And some people are very good at it. They're good at positioning themselves
Yeah.
for the next title or the next role. We've all sat there and we know someone where we've been overlooked or we watch them climb the ladder and we think, him? Her?
Well, it's so
Like,
funny because I think it's because they're good at the politics that got them there. But also, if you really did a deep dive, I feel like the folks that are really, really good at the politics aren't that great at being an operator and executor.
no, they're not. And that was something that I had to figure out. Because I'm wired to do the work. I am the roll up your sleeves. And it was important to me as well as I started managing teams and moving into, executive roles. I feel it very important that I need to have either done or have a really solid
Yeah.
understanding of what my team does and what those roles are. So to rush that climb was never really of interest. And I'm because I'm in that mode of building and doing and trying to deliver results, I'm not that person who's like, "Hey, look at me. Look what I did. Come over here and see this." So I probably slowed myself down potentially, and I would watch people move ahead, and it wasn't because they were better at the work, but what they were good at was advocating for themselves. And that I could connect because it's like, wait a second. Well, I advocate for customers. And just a shout
Yeah.
out to those, listening that are in those sort of customer facing roles. You're incredible. And you're incredible at putting customers on a platform. Please do it for yourself.
It's so
That
true.
that was a big moment for me, and that only happened probably, like, 5 years ago, and
So
I
how did you even get
realized
over that
that
then? Like, so what did you do? Like, give
uh,
us some advice here because
yeah,
that's a big shift, and I guarantee that for all the folks that are listening, that some of them are definitely struggling to navigate that. One, because they don't want to play the politics, right? So there's just no desire to do it. There's a lack of, I think, acceptance that it has to be done, right? To your point, even a little bit of it is going to be required if you want to grow in your career. But like give folks some advice. Like what would you tell them or what did you do specifically that helped you get over that?
So I went back to my roots, if I'm being honest, and I went back to writing. And what I
Oh,
did
interesting.
was I pulled out my resume and I looked at it and I said, this is not really showcase it's not bragging. And if
Mhm.
anything's going to be your brag book, it should be your resume or your LinkedIn profile, right?
Yep.
And I said, okay, I'm going to go through an exercise and I'm going to redo this and I'm going to really look at my results. Because the other thing, Chrissy, that I always struggle with is I don't want to be an asshole, excuse my language, but I don't want to be that. I want to be
Yeah.
a good person. I want to
Yeah.
be the person that supports your team. I want to be credible and
Yep.
have integrity. And sometimes balancing that in business isn't always, the easiest thing. So I need to let the results speak. So I would suggest everybody go through this exercise and really put yourself under the microscope and write it like, what did you do? Because I know you did stuff and I know people did amazing things and actually put pen to paper or sit in front of the screen and redo that resume. That was the first step for me so that I could just get comfortable with saying, you know what? You've actually done quite a few things and your work can speak
Right.
for you. But now you have to then take it to the next level. It's not enough. Like I try to tell my daughters, you put in the work, it will be rewarded. And sometimes that's difficult because you watch the world and you see people that aren't and it's being rewarded, but it's not always evident today because they all want to be like, an influencer on YouTube and bring in millions of dollars and they think it's so simple. But showing that and actually documenting, what you've done and putting it out into the world, I think that's the first step. And that was the big one for me. And then I got more comfortable. I got more comfortable with myself. I became more comfortable with, not bragging, but saying, "Yeah, I did that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I grew revenue by 3 times when we implemented this strategy." And just let it be. Let the outcomes speak for themselves.
You know what's so interesting is because I'm hearing a theme in that kind of brings me back to what you wanted to do when you were little, which is storytelling. Your
Yeah.
ability to tell a great story about your career and the impact you've had enabled you to open doors that hadn't been open before.
It's true, and now we have AI, so it could illustrate the book for me, so I wouldn't have to worry about the
So
the
maybe this is
artistic
still a potential career
challenge.
opportunity for you.
It could happen, but yes, it really is all in storytelling, and I think everyone's career is is a story, and I don't care if you're, like I did, I took a step back, I had my girls, and I couldn't do 70-hour weeks, and all of that is part of who you are, and
Right.
there's nothing wrong with that because I could give you 50 lessons I've learned from parenting that make me a better executive. I mean, these things all mush together, and that's why nothing is black and white. There's so much gray area in our careers and career journeys. And as you said, Christy, at the beginning of the call, we live in organized chaos.
Yeah.
Lives are messy. So I don't see why we need to delineate between those two things. I mean, within reason, of course, but they should kind of blend into one another. And I think it makes us better professionals.
I agree. I definitely agree with that. So let's do something that this is actually my favorite thing to ask folks because, especially women, I don't think that we spend enough time talking about our successes, right? Because we're all so ambitious. We've all got these big, lofty goals. We've got something in front of us. We accomplish it and we're on to the next thing. I feel like before we even acknowledge what just happened, we're moving and forging forward. So I want to force you to spend a couple minutes here to think back on your entire career. What are some of the proudest moments or the biggest accomplishments that you've seen so far?
Well, first of all, guilty. So very guilty of doing exactly what you
This is
just
why I forced this question into the conversation
described.
because I need you to go think back on all of your success because obviously you
Mhm.
wouldn't have gotten here if it wasn't for that.
Yeah, and we are wired, and I agree. I think women are probably more so to just move on to the next challenge because I don't, "Oh, I did that. Okay, that's great. Now what do we do next?" But I mean, there's definitely milestones that stand out. I hadn't even thought of this one until now. So, when I must have still been in my 20s, and I was just like long hours, 70-hour
Mhm.
hour weeks. I was, in a marketing department and I did. I climbed and I moved quickly and I got to a VP role prior to 30.
Mhm.
And I'm not going to lie, that felt really good because I worked really hard for it. And I think that moment, and I say that not to say, wow, how neat, I got to be a VP before 30. What I'm saying is that moment made me realize you can do it. You can do this. And you don't have to, but you can. And there's something very powerful about that confidence that instills. So I think that that was a big moment. And then actually not that long after, I think probably within a year or so, my second daughter was born and I was sitting there saying, I can't do this. I can't keep doing what the job
Yeah.
required and what home required. And I mentioned that because it was really hard for me to give up the title, if you will,
Mhm.
because I worked hard and I
Yeah.
can sit and say that titles don't matter, but they do. I mean, they don't in the grand scheme of
But
things,
they're
but it's a
signals. They're
nice,
signals of your
ego
success.
boost
Yeah.
and how hard you've worked. So that was equally as big of a milestone. And I think that one taught me, yes, you can do it, but you don't have to do it all the time, or you don't have to be everything to everyone in every moment.
Yeah.
And so, it's a series of decisions that we have to make. That said, um, when I was ready, then it was like, you know, pedal to the metal. Back to what I wanted to do, and I think that there were a lot of moments when I traveled a ton and the girls were in that early elementary age
Mm.
and I had to face, questions from other moms of, "Oh, that must just be so that must be so hard on them or hard on my husband." And I thought,
It's always
"No,
the passive comments that sting the most.
they do because that guilt and that, like,
Right.
questioning creeps in." So I digress a little bit, but all of that kinda goes together, as I was saying earlier. You just have to trust your instinct, and now today, I will have, my one daughter in particular who will say to me, "I wanna do what you did, and I want to, XYZ." And had I stepped back instead of pushing the pedal, she would not have had that same experience or impression of
Mhm.
what can be accomplished. So those were big moments, for me. And then the other piece, honestly, that has been it's a little more human than that is the opportunity when I got to the place in my career and still now to this day I kind of have these moments when people have asked for mentorship or could you give me advice? Can you help me evolve my career? I love that. I mean, it feeds me on a personal and professional level, and being able to see somebody that I'm mentoring get a promotion it's a pretty special feeling.
I
So
I
that
agree.
that piece of it as well.
Well, listen, at the end of the day, we're
And
human, like, we are leaders, and to be a leader, you're leading humans until we just lead robots. But right now, we're still leading
well,
humans.
uh,
Um,
still
right,
humans for
still
right
humans.
now.
And so, obviously, there is that human element of it. And so, obviously, the impact that you're having, and then being able to signal to others that want to emulate your success or trust you, and you've built such credibility that they want to lean on you in that capacity.
That's a great way of putting it, Christy. It's knowing that you have obviously done something and others view you as successful and they're coming to you and they're
Yeah.
looking for advice. And it was never about the whole women have it all kind of thing, but it was more about because you can't. Spoiler alert. Um, but it is, or you can, but you can't have it all
You
at the
can't
same
have it all
time.
at
That's
once.
for
I
sure.
was gonna say, I was like, there's a
Yeah,
caveat to that because you can have it all, you
there's a
can't have it all at
caveat.
once, especially if you're wanting to go on like a parenting journey of sorts or things like that. I think that
Yep.
uh, takes a different shape.
Yeah, it's a give and take kind of thing, and that was always that moment of, "Hey, wow, if other people are asking me for my opinion and advice, I must be doing something right." And if my kids are turning out all right and they're saying that they've learned a thing or 2, because if they're teenagers and they tell you that, that's big. It's
I mean,
monumental.
if they're teenagers and they're still talking to you, I think that that's big. So,
True. This is very true.
well, listen, so you started to talk about this. And so, again, the mentorship piece, I think, sets us up nicely for the next part of what I want to discuss here, which is I think you and I share this a lot, but, I love the saying that empowered women empower women. And I grew up in a time, and I think you and I are probably the same, where you just didn't have people so willing and eager to help you succeed. Even if there was a woman who was sitting in a seat more senior to myself, she wasn't giving me her hand to help me up. She was giving me a foot to the face to hold me
Oh,
back. And so I didn't
yep.
have a positive professional experience with women growing up. In fact, and that shaped me. Unfortunately, that shaped me very early in my leadership career until I could shed that, right? And like until I could recognize that that wasn't right, and just because it happened to me didn't need I had to break the cycle, right? So, for me, it became very important that I support other women, and I forget what I saw and forget what I learned and retrain myself to not see other women as competition, but that we're all kind of working together, and just because someone else is successful doesn't mean I'm not, right? Two things can be true. Like, I had to wire my brain that way.
Yep. They are not mutually
They are not
exclusive,
mutually
and
exclusive.
I had a similar experience, and I will be vulnerable here and say that I was not always the best because it was what had been modeled
Yeah.
for me. Actually I dated a guy once who just didn't understand it, and he said, "I don't get it because women could really kind of rule the world if you guys weren't so self-defeating." And
Mm.
it has stuck with me
Wow.
for a long time because it was so raw and honest, and if you think about it, it's like, yeah, because that's what you and I, and I'm
Yep.
sure others, that is what we kinda grew up with, and earlier in my career, when I was younger, I was less secure, I really was in a mindset of someone else's success somehow was threatening my
Yes.
success, and that was and especially with women, and I'm sad. It makes me sad to say that, to hear those words aloud, but there they are. Thankfully, over time, I realized something that was really important, and that was collaborating is a lot more powerful than competing.
Mhm.
And when we share knowledge and when we actually open doors for each other and we advocate for each other, we do benefit. Um, and so that's where empowerment is kind of it's a funny thing because sometimes it looks really big, right? Like mentoring and helping somebody land a leadership role. But I think often it's so much smaller and quieter than that. Encouraging somebody to speak up in a meeting, being quiet. I have a problem with that. Shocker.
Same.
Being quiet in a meeting to let someone else have the space, to speak so that they know their perspective matters. They can use, strengths that maybe they don't recognize in themselves. And I feel if we can do more of that, that lifting up like you said, rather than just stepping over or on each other, even worse, then we'll see more incredible women because there's so many that can move up into the C-suite. And that's certainly been a personal goal of mine because I do have a short list of women who are mentors um for me. And I would love for everyone to have a much longer list, right? As we continue to get better at supporting each other, then it's much easier to go to that list and say, "Oh, yeah, this person, this person, this person, they were there."
I too wish my list was longer. But it's so funny how many parallels there are to the experiences that we had. And I really love what you said there, like collaborating is more powerful than competing. And I just feel like I'd spent so much time of my life feeling like I needed to compete with other women. Right. And it was always women specifically. It wasn't like because there was plenty of
Feel
room for
that.
men to succeed, right? Like there was ample opportunities for them, but it felt like our opportunities were so limited that only one could win.
Yeah, that is how it felt. And you know what, Chrissy, now that I think about it, that whole VP thing, young in my
Mhm.
my career was probably extra validating because I worked there was not another woman
Yeah.
in my department.
Yes.
In fact, I think there were only a handful of women managing or leading in the company. So, yeah, I don't know what that is, why we feel that way. That's another
This
episode to dissect the
that is a
psychology
that I was
behind
just
it,
gonna
but
say, I'm like, that actually, if I'm thinking about it, this is a Rachel Proven topic where we need her to break down the behavioral psychology behind why that
yes.
exists and why we did the things we did. But I mean, in the simplest form, right? Like your point, we mirrored activities and behaviors that we saw. And so that's what we thought good looked like. That's what we thought it would take to get to those certain levels. I mean, like, I watched how certain women showed up, and I will tell you, even the early views I had, first of all, in my career, I never saw a woman who was VP or above for years into my career. For years. The highest I ever saw them
Mhm.
was a director level. And so I never even saw a female VP probably until I was about, I don't know, I want to say like 6, 7, maybe 8 years into my career, which is crazy. But that was the truth. So everyone was just emulating the behaviors of men, and that doesn't work.
Yep. And you know what's really interesting? Is this is a sidebar. In nonprofit, way more women in executive director roles and things like that. So why? Like, trying to unpack that compared to corporate America. Again, another episode. But that was very interesting, and maybe that was helpful to me in my years when I was in nonprofit because I did work with more women, and I saw more women running the show, so that probably at least a little bit of confidence boost, but then you go into the corporate America world, and it's like, "Whoa, where'd they all go?"
Yeah.
So, just interesting
It
observation.
is interesting. And listen, I am happy to say that I have professionally lived in a time where I see plenty of females succeeding. Now, is it the
Yeah,
number that we all want it to be? No, but it's far better than it once was. And so I have to reflect on that perspective. And the reason why is because I do feel like there's folks that are earlier in their careers, right? Like they don't have the same tenure and they came into the workforce seeing more women in these positions. So they
yeah,
demand that it improve exponentially. But I'm like, yeah, but if you rewind back to the 20 years before then when we started in our careers, there was no women. So to see what I see today, I actually feel like we've improved leaps and bounds. And like I'm
yeah.
not that I'm okay with the progress we've made. I wish it would be faster. I wish it would be more. I wish it would be better. But it's still progress. And I feel like I've lived in a time where I've seen it.
Yeah. It's refreshing to have, kind of grown up, I guess, in careers and seen that evolution. And I mean, you have a daughter and
Yep.
I have daughters, and that's really what it's all about is you want it to be better for the next
Yep.
generation, which means more opportunity, you're seeing more of yourself, represented. So I am glad to be a part of it. I'm glad to keep, promoting it and supporting it, and we just have to keep making sure that there's more women who are sitting in those seats.
Yep, absolutely, and we'll continue to forge the future. Okay, so I have to hit on one more thing before we start to wrap up today because I you hit on this also, and I have folks that ask me this all the time, and I always say it depends, but balancing the demands of having a very senior position and managing a personal life and even managing just our own self identity, it's super challenging. So, I don't
Yeah.
personally believe in balance, right? Like, there is just one set of time, the scales are never equal. Something is always taking priority over something else. But how do you manage that? Like, what is your life work integration balance, whatever you want to call it? What does it look like? So, how do you design your life intentionally so that you can show up when it's important for your girls, for your partner, also make sure that you're a great leader at work?
So I have a philosophy about marriage, which is very similar to this work-life
Oh
balance
gosh,
where
let's hear it.
it always it always has to be 100%, but it's never gonna be
Yep.
50-50. So there are days when I'm giving 30% and my husband has to put in the 70. It's the same thing, I think, with the work-life situation. There are times when work just it needs it, and that's where I have to put my focus, and that means home kind of, gets the back burner, but it always comes back to the front. So I try to be very aware of that. That's the first, piece of it. During the pandemic, that actually was incredibly helpful for me in learning because we were with our
Right.
families,
All
so
the time.
much more and all the time. And I now call them like micro joys where I I've always been a person who has to have something on the calendar to look forward to. I think since I was a kid. So it can be, oh, I'm going out for a nice dinner, it's a vacation, I'm getting a pedicure, I don't care. But something big or small has to be on the calendar. And I do the same thing to make sure that I have that in place. And then the third thing, and it's not easy, is be here now, which was something that we had in our culture when I was at United. I was like, toss away corporate jargon, but it's actually not. It was when you're on a call, you're on a call and you're focused on what is happening. And it's the same thing at home. And my girls have kept me honest ever since they were little and comments like, "You just got back from work trip. Why are you working again? Or
Mhm.
do you have to be looking at your phone right now?"
Yep.
So setting up some boundaries of no phone from, 5 to 9 or 5 to 8 or whatever you can do. It was honestly, it was game changing, and it's really hard. It's really
I
hard
mean, like, I
to do.
actually like, as you're saying it, I'm like, that feels like an impossible feat, right? Ran a marathon, no problem. Putting my phone down for a few hours, like, feels impossible. So, I will say this, Josh Schachter bought me the Brick, you know, those things that, like, disable your phones and, like, it's like a little
Oh,
device
yeah.
that, like, locks your phone, and it's so funny. So, he bought it for me, sent it to the house right before a work trip, and so it's still in the box, I have not set it up yet, but I think maybe this will be, like, my Q2 thing is, like, try to live life with this Brick and where I'm just, like, disabling certain apps and turning off my phone and, like, blocking out certain
Mhm.
time because I see myself, right? It's so bad, and we try to be intentional about it, like, if we're having dinner as a family or we go out to a restaurant, everyone leaves their phones in their bags or in their pockets, and, like, we don't put them on the table unless we're taking a photo of each other. We're not food
Yeah.
bloggers. So, unless we are capturing a moment that we choose to, outside of that, our phones are away, right? Like, so there are small moments like that where we are very intentional about disconnecting, but I can see that being really critical in order to be successful at anything, right? Like, just be present.
Yeah. So and I'm not always very good at it, but I that's all we can do. We're human. We just keep
That
coming
is
back to
true.
it and we try. And as the girls have gotten older and now they're getting ready to leave, like now we're doing the first last. You and I have talked
Oh my
about
gosh,
this
it's been such a
where
brutal
it's
year.
please be present in this
Yep.
because this is never going to happen
Yeah.
again. So, for anyone out there who, has kids that are younger, if you start doing it now, you'll get a lot better ROI on that philosophy of be here now than just waiting until the last year. So,
Oh man.
try it out a little earlier than I did.
Oh my gosh, this is too touchy of a topic. I don't want to end this episode in tears, but we might very well. That in this house right now, we are navigating all of those moments, right? The last everything, the last sporting event, the last play, the last award ceremony, like it's too much right now. Especially as we wind down like the last couple months.
Yeah,
It's not even like we're in
that's
September
true.
anymore. This is April. School's over in June.
Oh,
So my house is like an emotional roller coaster. Um, With that said, Allison, I have loved this conversation. But before we wrap up today, I know that you've left us with a lot of advice and a lot of things to consider. What's one thing throughout all of the things that you've lived through, experienced, things you've succeeded in, challenges you've overcome? What's the one piece of advice you want to leave for our listeners?
one thing that my dad, other than thinking I was going to be a best-selling author, he would always say hindsight's 2020. And it's so true. So if I could go back and give advice to my younger self or to others, I would say stop waiting for someone to tell you that you're ready.
Mm.
Um, I don't know why we feel like we need permission to take on another, task, move to another role or something like that. Because you You don't need to. Only you know when you're ready. So that's one of the big ones, and that took a little bit for me to kind of wrap my arms around. And then the other thing that I would say that I've learned is that impact and visibility are two different things. And that goes back to something we were talking
Yep.
about, earlier. If you don't occasionally step forward and help others see the value of the work that you're doing, opportunities will pass you by. So make that conscious effort to, even though you're just crushing it and doing all kinds of great stuff, if nobody knows you're doing it, It's in a vacuum. I hate to say it, but it really doesn't matter. Um,
Right.
yeah, I think that you have to trust your instincts. It's just something that goes in with like don't letting people tell you when you're ready. It's take your moment when you see it, even and if it feels a little uncomfortable, it's probably your moment.
I
Because if you
love
don't feel
that.
uncomfortable, it's not worth it. It's supposed to feel that way. And I've felt it every single time I've made any sort of major life decision, career decision. The self doubt is supposed to creep in. You're supposed to feel a little bit of imposter syndrome because that means it's worth it. And that means that you are ready because you should be challenged and it should feel strange and it should teach you something as you go forth and try to do whatever it is. And certainly something that I tell my girls and I certainly keep telling myself, even today. I'm working on something right now and it feels weird and I don't know if I want to go there, which means I should probably go there.
I
So,
think that's an amazing way to wrap up this episode. So, Allison, thank you so much for your time today and sharing your journey with us. I really appreciate it. Obviously, as your friend, I sit on the sidelines and have been watching this unfold before me, but I think it's really important for us to share these stories, especially with folks who are aspiring to have some success in their career, whether that looks like a leadership role or some other definition of
mhm,
success. But I think it's easy for us to emulate those that we see. And we've talked about this, right? We didn't grow up in a time where
we
we
have.
saw a lot of women. So I think it's important we continue to share. So thank you so much for that.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. That being invited was sort of the same like pinch me moment of, wow, look at that. Now I get to be on KristI's podcast. I've arrived.
Oh, please stop. I felt that way when I was on your podcast. So like this is these moments where we all get to come together. And for everyone who's made it to this far in the episode, thank you so much for sticking it out. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, connect with us both on LinkedIn. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Hi guys, I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of two amazing women each week, on Wednesdays, of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn.